So since the initial news came out that the Jets would be moving on from Aaron Rodgers going into 2025, there has been some more information come out from Diana Russini of The Athletic, and she went into more detail here explaining exactly what took place between Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. She says the Aaron Rodgers era is over for the New York Jets, though the team did present Rodgers with a potential plan to move forward with him as their quarterback in 2025. It included stipulations about outside media work during the season and a requirement that he attend all mandatory off-season workouts according to team and league sources. Rodgers flew to New Jersey last week to meet with team leadership, including new head coach Aaron Glenn and general manager Darren Moogie. Heading into the meeting, the Jets were undecided on whether to go forward with Rodgers, but were open to the possibility if Rodgers agreed to make adjustments. And then they say among them. And so what I find interesting is based on the initial report, it sounded as if the Jets had Rodgers fly all the way out to New York to tell him that they no longer wanted him on the Jets in 2025. But actually, here we have from Russini that there was actually a chance that maybe this meeting went in such a way that Rodgers could agree to return to New York in 2025. So they were undecided, supposedly, when this meeting began. But here are the stipulations or the adjustments that they wanted Rodgers to agree to if he wanted to be the quarterback. Here they are. Rodgers would no longer be permitted to make outside media appearances during the season, including his regular paid appearances on the Pat McAfee show. He would be required to attend all mandatory practices. Last year, Rodgers missed 2 mandatory minicamp practices due to a previously scheduled vacation trip to Egypt. The tone of the meeting was much different than when a Jets contingent recruited Rodgers 2 years ago. Glenn and Moogie were not contentious, but they were clear regarding what the expectations for Rodgers would be. A team source viewed it as a necessary step in emphasizing a higher level of accountability that would apply to every player on the roster. The Jets are now expected to trade or release the 41-year-old quarterback who has 1 season left on his contract. And so it's pretty interesting. The very first thing here, the first adjustment they wanted Rodgers to make was that he couldn't make any outside media appearances during the season. And I wonder if that's something that Aaron Glenn, as a new head coach in New York, is planning to make necessary for every single player on the roster, or is it just Aaron Rodgers because he's Aaron Rodgers and obviously everything he says gets broadcasted to a lot of people because obviously of his popularity. But the part there later brings up they want a higher level of accountability that would apply to every player. So that's where I'm like, okay, I would understand if they're telling every single player you can't go and do outside media during the season, then I would understand why they would say the same thing to Rodgers. But if it were the case that it's just Rodgers who can't go out and do media appearances, I wouldn't understand that. And the other thing is, I wouldn't expect Aaron Rodgers to agree to these terms because Rodgers likes to be able to say whatever he wants and be able to have the freedom to go on a podcast like the Pat McAfee show. And I understand if you're Rodgers and you're 41 years old and you're the type of quarterback you are, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. You're, in my opinion, the most talented quarterback and throw their football of all time. To tell him, you can't make outside media appearances during the season, I think that's a little much, even though I do understand where the Jets are coming from, because if you're Aaron Glenn coming in as a new head coach, you want to make sure that you're setting up a situation when you're in New York where guys aren't, bigger than the team. And I think that when Rodgers came into New York initially, when he got traded from the Packers a couple of years back, the Jets were doing everything to make him happy. They were allowing him to have those conversations about guys he wanted to bring in, which was something that Rodgers felt like during his time in Green Bay, he didn't really get that same opportunity to be in those conversations for potential free agents, things like that. And from the outside, it looked like with the Jets, they gave him that opportunity when he came into New York. And I fully understand why they would allow Rodgers to at least be somewhat involved in those kinds of conversations, because I do think that if you're a quarterback of Rodgers' caliber, even guys like Tom Brady, I think it's completely reasonable for them to have some kind of say and give you some advice or what they think could work out, going into the season. And of course, it didn't work out in New York with Rodgers. You could go back and say, okay, they shouldn't have let Rodgers have as much say as he had. But I don't think that was a problem, in my opinion. I think that's fully fine. I think that Rodgers, he's not the quarterback he once used to be. I still think he can, play some solid football here and there. He's not as consistent. He had one of his worst years in the league last season when you look at, passer rating. And so I think the biggest thing is he's not the quarterback he once was. The Jets defense was not as good as it had been in years past. And so it just didn't go well in New York. And then the final thing is, when you look at Rodgers not being able to go on the Pat McAfee show, I really wonder if, when the Jets and Aaron Glenn and the GM are making the decision of what they want to do at quarterback going into the next season, did they really think that if they brought up to Aaron Rodgers, hey, just want to let you know, we know you love to go on the Pat McAfee show. We know you love to go and make other podcast appearances. Did they really think telling Rodgers, hey, if you're going to come back to New York, you can't do that? Did they really think there was a chance Rodgers was going to say, you know what, I love that idea. I love that you're controlling me and not allowing me to go on these podcasts that I enjoy going on? I doubt they really thought that would be something Rodgers would really be up for. And for all we know, Rodgers could have already made the decision that he didn't want to return to New York regardless of what had happened. I think that with all that went down there, it could have been that Rodgers was thinking to himself that he wants to go elsewhere. So I just really wonder if the Jets actually wanted him back, if he would agree to those things. Maybe they were okay with it if he agreed to those things. But even though I think that Rodgers can cause can create a lot of noise on these podcasts because he is Aaron Rodgers and everything he says gets dissected at a very high level, I get why the Jets wanted to try to sort of control, the noise coming out of New York going forward, because they knew, like, if they were struggling and let's say some bad things were going down, sometimes Rodgers brings that stuff up on these podcasts. And so I get why they don't want that taking place. And I think they probably just don't want it to become any kind of distraction. And then I also get that they don't want him to miss practice, miss mandatory minicamp, mandatory practices. I understand it. For me, I think with Rodgers late in his career, I was more okay with him missing some of his practices in Green Bay, because I think that when you've played a certain amount of time in the NFL, I do think that you deserve some kind of, opportunity to maybe take a little bit more time off. Because in my mind, let's say that, Rodgers taking those 2 days off to go to go to Egypt, if that would make him in a better mind space and better headspace going into his season last year, then okay, what is 2 days for Aaron Rodgers and mandatory minicamp when he's played football for 15 to 20 years? So I don't think that was as much as a big deal, but it sounds like the Jets really want to control things, and Aaron Glenn doesn't want anyone to sort of be above anyone else, or for anyone to feel like they're making the decisions or they're bigger than any other guy on the team. So that's sort of the whole situation with the Jets. We'll see what happens with Rodgers going forward. I did make a video breaking down why I do think the Steelers are a perfect fit for Rodgers. If you want to check that one out, feel free to watch the video here. And if you want more NFL content like this, feel free to subscribe. I put out multiple NFL videos throughout the week.